Do you find this offensive? That, of course, was Tottenham Hotspur's fans supporting their team. The club traditionally has a strong Jewish following, but the Football Association has said it's not acceptable for their fans to use the word Yid. David Cameron, however, has argued that it's fine for Tottenham fans to do so, as they are not motivated by hate. Well, joining me to discuss this are the journalist David Aaronovitch and the actor and writer David Schneider. Welcome to both of you.
Hi, thanks.
Is the term Yid offensive, David Aaronovitch?
In most contexts in which it's used against somebody as an attempt to offend them and to be detrimental about them, yes, but not in all circumstances. And as used by Spurs fans, no.
Is that right? Can you make it that sort of subtle and nuanced, if you like? It's either offensive or it's not.
Well, no, I think as a comedian, I suppose, you're always aware of what you say, whether it's a joke or whatever, how it's going to play, how you intend it, so the context that you intend it. So in the way people say Spurs are self-identifying, that's fine. But it's also who's receiving it, who's listening to it. So the reason I think it's wrong, which is a decision that I've only recently made, the reason I think it's wrong is because of the response, because of the audience, i.e. everyone else, the Chelsea fans, the West Ham fans, anyone else who then replies with the gas noises, the Holocaust chants. And I think that, so my beef is not so much with the Spurs fans, it's with the general response. But the Spurs fans now have to take responsibility to accept that the Y word, and I'm shocked at how people bandy it around, like on your Twitter feed. It makes me cringe to say that. I can't say the word like the N-word, and yet people are saying Yid just without inverted commas, not saying Y word. And I think that shows how it's wrong what's going on.
Because all you're encouraging, David Aaronovitch, is for people to be, even if they don't intend it to be pejorative, to use a pejorative term that can be misused, taken out of context, and can offend people.
I think there's a kind of an absurdity at in the middle of all this. Here's a word, Yid. Actually, my grandmother spoke nothing but Yiddish.
Yes.
Actually, that was the language the language she actually spoke. So actually, even in a Jewish context, the word Yid is not always
Well, that's not true.
It comes from the German word Jude, doesn't it?
I actually do speak Yiddish as myself. I'm sort of the youngest Yiddish speaker in the world, probably. But and I do speak. And Yid is fine. I don't mind saying Yid, which is what it comes from. It doesn't come from Judah. It comes from the Yiddish Yid. But when it's in the English language, it is offensive.
Well, what I was going to go on to say is, it seems to me absurd that a word which is used by people who aren't using it to be offensive, that actually isn't offensive to Jewish people when hearing it in that context, and by and large it isn't, should in a sense be regarded as being something you have to stop, because other people might take it up as a basis upon which they then build their own.
But surely that is everyone has a personal responsibility. Let's look at the N-word. Why is the N-word so not acceptable, but the Y-word seems to be acceptable? Well, and if I, as a white person, use the N-word, that would be wrong.
In any context.
In any context.
Well, it may very well be, actually, that in a comic context you could find ways of using it. So actually that's not true. And I seem to remember, David, that you were one of the people who was very upset about the idea of introducing any kind of law about religious discrimination because of the effect that it might have had on comics and so on, because you wanted the freedom to be able to use words and so on.
Well, as Spider-Man would say, with great freedom comes great responsibility. Now, it's power he wants. But anyway, what I'm saying is, it's all very well having freedom to say what you want, but you also have to be responsible and aware of the effect of what you say.
Let's talk about this. This is a chant at a football match, I don't really think that football fans should sit there saying, what is my wider social responsibility at the point of making a chant?
Why not?
No. Of course, why not? Because that's not what you're there to do. You're not there to prove your social responsibility.
No, but
you're partially there to celebrate, if you like, your triumph. But the point is, and so there are things, actually, that Spurs fans have chanted over the years that are really genuinely offensive, and that I, for one, have wanted them to stop. This is not one of them. It doesn't offend
But for the
anyone.
Football Association, because they're in a tricky position here, can they afford to be, if you like, intellectualise about it in that way, if they are trying to get rid of racism in football?
They're only in a tricky position because they're dumb. Really, they're only in a tricky position because I mean, if they want to take up the business of anti-Semitism or any other form of racism on the part of clubs and fans who actually use it, by all means do.
So we're on a politics show, okay? So what would happen, by your logic, if Ed Miliband self-identified as, I'm going to try and say the word, as a Yid, and called the Labour the Yid Army? Would Cameron say that's fine? Would everyone think that's absolutely fine because it's Ed Miliband at question time saying Yid? He shouldn't. He wouldn't, because he's got to take responsibility.
If Ed
for that
Miliband
word.
was a West Ham supporter and broke into a chorus of "I'm forever blowing bubbles," everybody would think it was strange. Politicians aren't, and they aren't in the same business as football fans.
Right, just briefly, should David Cameron have actually got involved in this row, though?
I think it's lose-lose for him. We're a better country for people being sensitive about these things, but we create linguistic minefields. First time I went to White Hart Lane in the mid-90s, I think there's a drum, chap beats a drum, and then everybody shouts that word, or they did then. I was absolutely shocked. I couldn't believe it. But there are linguistic minefields
They banned
everywhere.
the drum.
They banned the drum.
Now they want to ban the word.
The drum is banned, but not the word.
You did
I don't believe it.
the N-word, but don't black rap artists occasionally use the N-word, and that's a sort of reclaiming
but that's
of
another
the word.
point, is that it's not. If it was only Jews, if this was in a synagogue, it might be different.
Yeah, the mind boggles to hear it in the synagogue. Yeah.
What percentage of Jews does it have to be then, David? Does it have to be 5%, 25%, 35%?
I'll answer your question. I would say it has to be mostly Jews and to a mostly Jewish audience, so that the irony is clear. I think the problem is you're talking about Spurs fans. The problem is not Spurs fans; it's other fans.
No, I agree. I completely agree. That, and therefore, in a sense, the location of this problem with them is actually itself a problem. And to defend David Cameron for a moment, he replied because he was asked.